Welcome back to the show. Yes, we are here in the Speakeasy this week. Special guest for you. Oh, I'm so excited. State Representative Allison Tant. She's been an aide. She's been a lobbyist. She's been the chair of the Florida Democratic Party, and she is the state representative from House District 9. We will talk about all the advocacy and work she's done for people with disabilities like her son. We talk about Jefferson County schools. Also, of course, you want to know what's happening with the legislative session. She'll give us her take on what's in store. So please join us today, State Representative Allison Tant.
We're now at a place where, the budget has to get done. Constitutionally, that is our one mandated duty to do.
You're listening to Deeper Dive with Dara and Allison, a podcast by the News Service of Florida. Let's dive in.
Oh my goody gosh, folks. We are back in the Speakeasy this week, and our special guest, I'm really excited about this, is State Representative Allison Tant. You know her. She's been around for a minute.
Yes.
And like me, we knew each other. We've known each other for a long time.
Yeah.
I will say, I will put you in the OG category. I guess I have to.
Well, so when did you start? You remember what year?
Well, let's just say I was reporting during the 2000 recount. So
I preceded that. So I was in this process starting in 1984. So I've been around. And then I took a hiatus when our son Jeremy was born, and now I'm back in yet another iteration.
So I was going to say you are welcome to the show.
Thanks.
Welcome to the Speakeasy. So now you're a diva. If you weren't before. Yes. So you were a legislative aide. Mm-hmm. You were a lobbyist. You were the chairperson, I don't know what you like to be called, of the Florida Democratic Party. And now you are a state representative representing not only Leon County and Tallahassee, but several surrounding counties. And
Jefferson and Madison. Right.
Okay. Mm-hmm. And so we'll get into all of that a little later because you've got quite the stellar reputation representing your rural counties. So tell me a little bit about you first. How did you get involved in the process?
It's a very interesting, I never intended to. So I was the first in my family to go to college. My mom was raised in poverty and picking berries and tobacco in the fields of North Carolina. And she told me, you will not have an option of do not get in trouble. Don't go chasing any boys. You're going to go to college because the only thing I can give you is an education. And I'm going to make sure you get that education because we're not going to be able to leave you anything but this.
See, I've already learned something because I didn't know that.
Yeah, my dad was placed in an orphanage where he grew up.
I was an orphan. I just told you. Anyway.
So he was in an orphanage from age 8 to 18.
I didn't live in an orphanage.
So,
wow, really?
Yes. And so I come from very humble beginnings. And so I came to college at Florida State. I had student loans. And then my sister came along after me 2.5 years later, 3 years later, to start her college years. And so to help out my parents, I decided I should go look for a job. So at the time, FSU had this job board. So I went and looked at it. It was the school year had already started. And so on the job board I looked around, there was nothing on there that I saw that I thought I was this interesting. And I see this placement as an intern for Governor Graham. So I called and I got the job, and it was a paid internship, which was a stipend. And for me, that was a lot of money at the time. Wow. And so I went to work in the Office of Planning and Budgeting, which is not very sexy. It's not like people don't really know what it does, but I saw firsthand what smart, efficient government looks like and its impact on the lives of real people, and then could conjure what it would be like if it were not there for real people. And so that was a big eye-opener for me as a college kid who prior to that was looking for my next social, worried about whether or not I had another parking ticket, that kind of stuff. So it was a very teachable time for me, and I learned from that. So I still had no plan to do anything in this process. But then I went home from college thinking I was going to be a hot commodity for a job. And of course, like every college grad, you learn that you're starting at the bottom and working your way up. And I didn't know where to even begin. I tried to do like some communications and writing stuff, but not writing like you writing, but writing like press releases or PR kind of stuff. So,
and this is back in North Carolina?
No, this is in Jacksonville. I was raised in Jacksonville.
Okay.
So
I
my
knew
parents,
you had a Jacksonville
my
connection.
mom and dad moved to Florida with the railroad. So the railroad, they started when it was the Atlantic Coastline Railroad. It became the Seaboard Coastline Railroad. They located in Florida in 1961. And then by the time they retired, it was CSX. They worked with the railroad. So I say the railroad put me through college.
He was a union guy?
No, they were, I don't think that they were. My mom was in the accounting office.
Okay, so they both worked for the railroad.
Yes, they both did.
Okay.
And so I didn't have a job, and my mom looked at me one day, and a couple of months after college, and she says, "You're going to need to stop feeling sorry for yourself. So if you can't get paid work, go do something volunteer." So I'm thinking, I'm not a candy striper. I'm thinking volunteer because, we didn't think along those lines back in the 80s,
It wasn't required to graduate from high school.
Right. There was nothing, and so unless you had something, we did a lot of stuff through the church. My mom was very, very active in the community through her church service. But then she said to me, Bill Bankhead works at the railroad and he's a state rep and you should go maybe work in his office. I'll talk to him for you. And I'm like, don't talk to anybody for me. I'll do it myself. So the first time I called the office to see if I could do some volunteer work, I asked for Representative Blankhead by accident. So they hung up on me, which was great. So,
Blankhead, that's hilarious.
So then I called back and I asked the right way. And then I said, would you like an extra set of hands? I would love to be able to come in and do whatever you need. So they actually put me to work, and I came in, and they were very gracious about it, and I developed a really great relationship with Bill and his family at the time. So I started doing like a little, once the pressure was off to do some press releases, I drafted the newsletters, I did stuffing envelopes, constituent replies to things, whatever they needed, I did. So then it was the session, the legislative. No. This is what happened is we went to a delegation meeting, and I went to the delegation meeting in Jacksonville, and there was Senator Hare, and I met Senator Hare and his aide.
Okay, I have never even heard of Senator Hare.
Senator Maddox Hare from Jacksonville.
I'm so sorry.
Yeah, it's okay. So then they had a paid position. So I went ahead and took that paid position as the lowest level legislative secretary at the time, making $11,400 a year.
But that's exciting
It
job.
was. It was. And so then they brought me over with them for the session, and I got bit by the bug. But what was interesting, so I've told this story lately in response to the whole Guana River Preserve. So in 1984, when I was working with Senator Hare, he was responsible for getting the Guana River Preserve conserved through the Conservation and Recreational Lands Program. And I wrote the talking points and his speech and press releases about it. About all that. So that when that issue came up last week or whenever 10 days ago, I mean, it was very personal to me because I knew that parcel. I knew that the pristine, perfect.
This is the land that was part of the swap
question. Right. So that's why I got vocal on it, because also this past Thanksgiving, after that crazy campaign I had, and then my son got married 4 days later, and then the next week later we were sworn in. I had rented an Airbnb in Volano Beach, and we drove right past that property, and it was just awe-inspiring. So at any rate, getting back at the ranch, getting back to where we started. So I was working for Senator Hare, and I was looking for my next gig. I was 23 years old, 22. I can't remember how old I was. And I found a job in the Tampa area to be a legislative aide. And there were two things. There was a job with the state association to do communications, or there was the legislative aide position for then Representative Mark Gibbons down in Tampa. I followed my heart and went to Tampa. So I worked for Representative Gibbons, who is now deceased, but I worked with him for his one term that he was in office because he was tapped to be the lieutenant governor to Harry Johnston.
Oh my gosh.
Back in the day.
Okay, that is really blast from the past here. Yeah.
Right. Now this is like how long it's been, right?
Yeah.
So, and of course that campaign was not successful. And then I went to work for Brian Rush, also from the Tampa Bay area. And then by that time I finished working with Brian for 2 years, I had the itch. I needed to move to the next thing for me. So I moved to Tallahassee, where I became the legislative director for the Department of Business and Professional Regulation under then Governor Martinez.
Oh, wow. So now you've got,
I went from
you're bipartisan.
Staff to then just going full on into the legislative advocacy and that whole lobbying world. So it was, and that was like trial by fire because I was representing 45 regulated professions. That was back when all of the healthcare professional regulation, anything from real estate agents to plumbers to contractors to engineers to architects, professional regulation, as well as all the healthcare regulation.
That's right.
So there
cosmetology,
barbering, all of it. So it was not anything to do with like the gaming or anything like that. It was like pretty much everything else. So at any rate, so I did that for 2 years, and then went into the private sector. First with Steele, Hector and Davis law firm, representing business clients generally, and then moved over to Holland and Knight, where I stayed there. So that would have been 1990 that I switched to the private sector advocacy work with Steele, Hector and Davis. And then a couple of years later, we moved over to Holland and Knight law firm, where most of our clients went with us, and it was a really good, productive 10, 11 years, I think. I think
that's when I probably first met you, when you were lobbying for Holland and Knight.
Right. And so then, so that would have been about right. So I represented clients like Mayo Clinic, Bristol-Myers Squibb, Genentech, the Securities Industry Association, AmSouth Banks, which is now not Regions, and then a host of others. So GE Medical Systems,
big players,
big ones. And then in 1996, Barry and I got married, and then
Barry Richard for kids who don't have. Yeah. Our divas are very sophisticated, but every once in a while we get somebody who's new to the process. So your husband is Barry Richard, who's a very prominent constitutional law attorney who I've known for a very long time and very highly respected.
Thank you. I certainly feel the same way about him. I think he's one of the best lawyers. And when I say to him, I think you're the best lawyer in Florida, he goes, just Florida?
Like, oh, that's funny.
Right.
That's
so no, darling,
that's
everywhere.
Funny.
So yes, he's really amazing as an attorney and husband and father. So at any rate, so then in 1998 we had our twins, and one of our twins has a disabling condition called Williams syndrome, and I had one session left after he had open heart surgery when he was 23 months old.
Oh my gosh!
And so that was really quite harrowing because they had to operate in two places of his heart, and in one place he was disconnected from like the heart-lung machine. So I was praying for him to come back from that, and he did, and he's wonderful. But so after that, I kind of was burnt out. I needed to step away. Yeah, I actually, when I found myself telling a legislator, I don't give a what about whether your bill passes.
She's self-censoring because I said there was we had a little pool going on to see who would drop more F-bombs, Allison or John Morgan or Dara Cam. And so now she's self-censoring. We do have an explicit warning that we put on almost every show. So feel free to speak as you would normally speak. Right, I'm not encouraging you to. But
yeah, I do have a swear jar and it's full. So I have to...
So what's the purpose?
I don't know. I got to restock. I need a bigger swear jar. So my child gave it to me.
That's funny.
Yeah. So at any rate,
I live alone, so Max doesn't have any say in how. My dog Max doesn't.
Right. Well, so my kids thought it was funny because Barry and I had a ticker running. Which one of us is going to be the one that says the F-bomb in front of one of the kids first, and everybody's money was on me, and it was actually him. He was changing a light kit standing on top of a bed for a ceiling fan.
There you go. That'll
do it for
home
anybody.
Improvement will always that'll always get you in the in the swear jar.
Yeah. So then one of the boys walked by in his diaper going, "Fa, fa, fa." So that was really funny. So at any rate, so I took when I was telling this legislator that I didn't give a rat's ass if his bill was going to pass, but if it was going to pass, he was going to have to pass it with the language on it that I was bringing to him. And then I was like, I felt myself fraying at the edges a little bit, and I thought that was inappropriate. So I decided I had to step back. So I took a hiatus. And never intended, to be in politics. I wanted to be home with my kids making mud pies. And it turned out that I didn't have the opportunity to make mud pies because Jeremy's developmental disability needs required me to be all in for him. Right. We had 5 therapies 3 times a week. We were doing all the things. And so my advocacy skills got put to use in starting to address state laws and rules and what have you. But it was as a stay-at-home mom with little kids and another one on the way. Our daughter joined the fun a few years later. And then at some point, I was like a person people consulted locally about who should we support for this race or that. And so I started giving people endorsements and fundraising, quite a bit of fundraising for various candidates. And so then the Obama years happened, and I was on one of the first in the ground here locally before the first quarter, actually, to help launch his campaign with Alan Katz. I don't know if you remember Ambassador Katz here. So we did that. I did that as a volunteer, state volunteer. And so
I think I went to a fundraiser
you probably
at your house.
Did. Yeah.
Actually. Back then.
And so we did that. I just got involved in that. And so out of that, after just, years of doing that, and also just doing the other stuff I did as a mom, volunteer at school, doing all the things for the kids. One day I get this call and it's like, we need you to run for party chair. And I'm like, I don't know anything about that. I don't know if I want to do that. And then my husband said, Allison, it'll be fun, he says. So,
so we can blame Barry.
Yes, you can. You can.
That's hilarious.
You tell him the next time you see him.
I will. I for sure I will.
So then, so I went ahead and said, okay, I'll do it. It was Bill Nelson was after me to do it. Debbie Wasserman Schultz, basically, a bunch of people all over Florida were calling me. Every congressman and woman in D.C.
She's
called.
A diva. So Debbie Wasserman Schultz has been on the show.
Yeah,
she's coming back.
She's awesome.
Yeah.
And so, I ended up doing it.
So they twisted your arm.
Yep. And they said, oh, we're going to help with the election for chair. And then I had to fight my way out of a bag on that because, there were other people, party activists who thought they should have a different chair, not somebody who was from like this other plane that they, hadn't been involved in. So, but at any rate, so I fought my way into it. I won and then proceeded to start fundraising. Like I literally, the Monday after the election, I walked in the office and it was, okay, go. So I raised $175,000 in an afternoon and we were off to the races.
You're a monster fundraiser too. I should have put that in your intro. Like this lady is crazy with the fundraising people. Yeah. And that is one of my questions. We'll get into that in a minute, but okay, so you were, and this was kind of like refresh our minds about the time.
2013. So the election.
When Democrats still were not completely shut out politically in Florida.
Yes.
So they were still relevant.
Yes. So this was after the 2012 presidential election that the election for party chair was in January of 13. So January of 13 to January of 17. So those years, and those were years when, things were coming off the Obama era. And then
Florida went for Obama.
Yes, Florida was very, very much an Obama state.
Yeah. And people might seem weird to people now because it doesn't seem like that long ago to me.
Right.
And yet we have moved so far.
We have.
Yeah.
A lot. So I was very instrumental in the 2008 election. And then after the 2012, and I kept my network alive so that when it came time for 2012, I just set fire to it again. And I decided, one term was enough of that job. I was tired. I wanted to be with my children.
It's a demanding.
And you're always.
And it's a big state.
It's a big state.
A lot.
It's interesting because at the DNC meetings, I'd be talking to other chairs. They could be from one side of their state to the other in 2 hours. And I'm like,
They have no idea. People who don't live in Florida have no idea that it's like, oh, there's a meeting in Miami. Do you think you can make
Oh, yeah. I would get that all the time. I would, literally, they would say, okay, our big fundraiser is next week. And I'm like, okay, you could have told me before now.
Right.
And aren't you going to come? And I'm like, well, see, the flights are $1,700.
Yes.
So
it takes you all day too.
Right. And
back then, especially, it would take all day to fly from Tallahassee to anywhere.
Yes.
But yeah.
It was, so those were very demanding times. And so at any rate, so then I stopped that in 2017 and then immediately so I talked to a friend who told me about this housing option for people with cognitive disabilities. And Jeremy, of course, and Jonathan, my twins, they were, they weren't ready for that yet. Jonathan was graduating high school, so that year. So, and then Jeremy, because he's disabled, could stay in K-12 for a couple more years. So at any rate, I found out about this housing model through Florida Housing Finance Corporation that's available, and it's a big lift, huge lift. And I put together a board. We got our 501c3, and it was like we were off to the races to go build Independence Landing. So that's what I focused on solely. No plans to run for office. Never thought I would ever do it. And then you might recall that Bill Monford was being courted to run for mayor for a short time.
I do remember that.
Mm-hmm. I wasn't even thinking about it because actually Loran was in the House seat and she was looking for somebody to run for her seat when she was done.
Right.
And they come to me and they said, would you like to do it? I'm like, no, I got to focus on Independence Landing. That's all I'm going to focus on. Then it was Bill Monford. Oh, he's going to run. He's going to run for mayor, which means the Senate seat will be open. Loran will run for that. It'll be a special election. Yeah, I think I could work that into my schedule. Yeah, let's do that. Let's do this. This will be 6-8 weeks. It'll be fine. We'll get it over with. And then, of course, Bill didn't run for mayor. Right. And by that point, everybody knew my intentions. And so I had to pretty much fish or cut bait,
right?
And so I decided to go ahead and I think somebody on my team wanted me to go ahead and announce, and I wasn't planning to announce as early as I did because then I knew so the way it works is if you announce, then you have to have a bank account open and you can't raise money till you get the bank account open. And if you don't have money raised, then you don't look viable. So it was like off to the races. So I immediately had to
You have to have everything ready and pull the plug, and all those things need to be in place.
And you got to be, and I reached out to some friends and they said, well, we want to make sure you got the local support. So I just went and raised $110,000 in my first kickoff election. So I did that. And I was like, all right, here we are. I'm going to keep going.
That's crazy.
It was insane. And I'm just grateful. So at any rate, so that was in 2020. And I got elected in November of 2020 and started my legislative time. And here we are. Started in the third, I've already got one session in of my third term.
And we'll be right back with State Rep Allison Tant. Oh, divas. Yes, you know what time it is. It's that time. The news in haikus. The news in haikus. Countdown clock ticking. Looking for a path forward? No budget in sight. That's the news in haikus. The news in haikus. Don't forget, we'd love to hear your haiku. You can slide them into my DMs or you can send them to podcasts, that's podcasts with an S, at e.newsserviceflorida.com. Wherever you're listening, please don't forget to subscribe and give us a rating if you like what we're doing. And we're back with Allison Tant. We are still in session, so I have to do this disclaimer lately as I'm recording these podcasts this year. Things are changing so rapidly. We are recording this on Thursday, May 29th, and as of today, there is still no budget. There is, I believe, the Senate I'm trying to catch me up. You were told you don't need to come back next week, or have we been?
Yeah, on Friday of last week. So the beginning of last week, we see this text from Peter Schorsch, who says, okay, the sales tax reduction is off the table. So I'm thinking, okay, great. We've made some progress. We're going to have an allocation. We're going to come back after Memorial Day, and we're going to have conference committees start, which I'm really anxious for. And then we're going to wrap up by the 6th, because that was our first end date. It was like we extended, but the House and Senate extended until June 6th. So on Friday, we get an email, sorry, we're not there yet.
Right.
So you will have all the days off after Memorial Day. You won't be back then. So, we will give you
another week off.
And so,
I think I tweeted, weep or cheer, another week off.
Well, and so for people like so many of the people that I know, like where I'm sitting on, I want to be ready. I want to be ready to go when we're doing this. And so,
also you can't be raising money.
Oh yeah. All that shut down. We're not allowed to raise money.
The Senate can, but you guys can't.
Yeah. We've got a quirky rule.
Right.
So the caucus can't. And then individual members cannot. Republican and Democratic caucuses can have fundraising events. We cannot on the House side. Also, no member, House or Senate, can raise money while we're still in session.
Right.
And so the session is considered up until June 6th now.
So far.
Now, in the House, we had a special election, a special session where we where there was a motion in front of us to extend through June 30th. Which
the House extended through June 30th, but the Senate didn't. Not. So that means basically it's worth the piece of paper that it's printed on, I guess. Right.
So, yes, I mean, basically.
Unless the Senate comes back.
The Senate would have to come back and concur
before
with that.
June 6th.
Which would be next week. What we saw yesterday is that the Senate is saying that there is no appetite to extend through the 30th. And so June 6th would be it, leaving it so that we would be looking at a call by the governor for a special. In addition to the budget, what might be added to that special is anybody's guess.
So that's what I was going to say. For Joe Lunchbucket and for our more sophisticated divas, what does that mean? What does that mean for the average person? Are we racing against a potential?
We are racing against the clock. So the fiscal year in Florida starts July 1.
That's right.
So we could literally go up to June 30th and expect the switch to go off if nothing's passed, or somehow figure out how to, bridge
the gap.
Bridge from all right, we passed the budget on June 30th. Now, this is one scenario. We passed the budget on June 30th. The governor still is going to need to review it for what he may or may not want to veto. I mean, but at least maybe we could keep our state employees paid, which I'm worried about since I represent so many of them. We could keep our agencies running that are serving.
I'm hearing that the governor is, and I'm sure you've heard this too, that they're looking at ways for him. There's some pot of money that he can access, maybe declare a state of emergency.
Rainy day fund or what have you.
Rainy day fund, so that some discretionary funds. And I don't know if it's rainy day fund, discretionary funds. I don't know which part.
I'm on the Legislative Budget Commission.
So they're meeting next week.
We've called a meeting. And so that's because we're going to have to figure out how to keep the wheels turning. I don't know if that's the way we decide to do this or not. So we'll find out. I'm as a person who probably of all of my getting represents the highest number of state employees.
Right.
I'm very concerned about
Are they concerned? Are you are they calling you? And
yes,
saying,
I'm getting a lot of questions. Yes. Well, what are we going to do? And this has been done before, one other time. And state employees were essentially said, well, you can work and we'll pay you back, or you can take time off. I don't know what's going to happen.
Well, if you're taking time off, you're not getting paid. Correct. I mean, you can take unpaid time off, and a lot of them have probably stacks and stacks of time off that they would get paid for, right? But
and then you've got I was at a funeral this week for a judge, and I ran into our public defender, and she says, we can't work unless you guys finish. You've got to finish that. So we know how much I got to hire people to do this job. The courts have to keep going. I still have cases pending. We do have a justice system that has to to run. And then like my school superintendents are like, I got to know, because like I've got to hire teachers for the new year. I can't wait till July. School starts in August, so it's there's just a lot.
And
it's
the
very
uncertainty is unsettling, and it's kind of disrupting people's ability to.
And the nonprofits that have state contracts. My elder care services here in Leon County that provides stuff to so many seniors.
And what about APD?
And think about this. That's another one. But also think about, we've got hurricane season starting June 1. I was at a Rotary meeting this week and giving them an update. And the question was, well, if we're shutting down FEMA and we don't have anything in the state budget and hurricane season's June 1, what do we do? And I'm like, I wish I had an answer for you. I wish I did.
As somebody who's been involved in the political process on all sides of it now, right? It's been kind of perplexing to me because the speaker has been very critical of the governor. The governor, I've been saying rock'em sock'em robots, the kids.
Yeah, that's an interesting analogy.
It's another, it's like they're constantly throwing down the gauntlet, and there's a lot of name calling and whatever. And behind the doors, behind closed doors, I've heard it's even worse than what we're seeing publicly. And now the speaker and the Senate president appear to be at odds. Strategically, for Republicans, if you're the speaker, and I keep trying to get him back on the show, and I want to ask him this question, and I will when I get him. How do you win here? What is the strategy behind letting the time run out and having the governor call the session and decide what you're going to take up, rather than keeping having your own control over your agenda? Do you know what I mean? They did gavel in and gavel out when they did the immigration thing. So I guess they could do the same. I would think you need a partner for that.
And
right.
That is not what's on the table right now.
So you know what I mean? How does this work out for the House or the Senate or the governor?
From what I can tell from the outside looking in,
right?
I'm not on the Republican. Danny's not going to tell me what his strategy is. That's a definite question for him.
Right.
But I do think that you see an alignment now between the governor's office and the Senate.
Right. Yeah. You saw the governor and the Senate president at an event not long ago, and that was more than just for that bill signing. That was signaling.
So I see the three-legged stool. I see two legs on the same side of the stool now. So I'm concerned with how this ends. And I'll be honest with you, and I've said this to friends, by the time we get this done, let's say we do get it done by June, and I surely hope we do, then we're going to be back in committee hearings for the next session in 3 months.
Right.
And I'm just worried about how we finish this and then start to navigate that and where we're going to be as a body. Overall,
as a legislature,
as the legislative branch, yes.
Right. Yeah. How do you, come? How do you sing Kumbaya? Right.
And how do you get to the edge of the cliff and then walk back from the edge?
It's so interesting to me because it feels different from different. We've seen this before to some extent where there's been breaks or there's been less than cordial relationships between the leaders, but this feels different to me.
Well, and they've had extended sessions in the past. My husband and I were talking about it, and he reminded me that there was one year we had like 10 months of hearings, but that was over reapportionment maps.
Right.
The budget was done, so they didn't have to fight over the budget. So we're now at a place where, the budget has to get done. Constitutionally, that is our one mandated duty to do. And so we still have, this is, I guess, the second time in history that we've been here, this place. And so I think at some point, we're going to have to face the fact that we've got this governance that is at the heart of what we have to do.
Do you think that Governor DeSantis emerges stronger?
Oh, he's already, yeah, I think so. In my view, he is. You saw that he's, you can never underestimate the power of the pen, nor can you underestimate the power of the pulpit. And he's got
the
a
bully
very
pulpit.
strong bully
Very
pulpit.
much so.
And he has used that successfully to message on things that have been on the table for this session, and I've had constituents reach out to me that are concerned about this or that or the other related to the budget, that both Republicans and Democrats say, this is worrisome to me. And then, of course, I've seen you probably have too, on social media, the attacks that have been launched against certain members of the House and by party activists
It's
on
brutal.
The Republican side. And yes, it is. It's been very brutal. And so we got to figure out how to repair this breach. And I'm not sure that it's reparable at this moment right now.
I agree with you. And so does this help the Democrats?
I will tell you, I don't know.
I have to say, our mutual friend told me not to ask that question.
I don't know. Honestly, we'd have to have someone, first of all, this is not our fight. The Democrats, this is not our fight. This is, in fact, the byproduct of an overwhelming supermajority where it is, and this happened to the Democrats way back
in the
when.
day.
Yes.
Right.
So I've always thought about the pendulum swinging and when it circles back, and we're seeing some of that now. Does it help the Democrats? The Democrats, we really don't have a role in this fight. And I think that we're going to see how this all plays out, and it's kind of on them to figure it out. I know that we have ideas for and alternatives, but we don't have the voice in the chamber. There's only 33 of us, and only so many in the Senate. So they're
10, I think.
They're down one with Pizzo.
Right.
So we're it's a very slim margin, but there's under no scenario are they going to let the Democrats fix this problem. So this is something that they have to.
Right.
They have to own, and they have to pick up the sticks and glue the house back together.
Yeah, glue it back together. Well, thank you for that, and and also thank you for that. I loved all that information about how you got to where we are today, and you've worn all those hats. What was your biggest surprise? What surprised you the most after you got elected to the state house, after being involved in the process for so long?
Well, my first session, and actually for my first two sessions, it was two sessions, very top-down driven process. Not for the Democrats, but for the Republicans. It was... If a bill got on committee and a committee agenda, it meant that it was going to pass. So it was like, this bill has been approved. This bill is on this, and it was essentially a consent agenda for my colleagues on the Republican side.
Wow.
They didn't have an option but to vote for it, no matter how they felt about the bill. And there were several bills that they voted for that they didn't really want to vote for, but it was like pretty much marching orders that they had to follow. This year was a little more member-driven. And I did see Republicans take no votes on bills that I
saw that in the House and the Senate. Yeah,
and it's the first time.
That.
And I welcome
and sometimes from people that you didn't expect.
Yes. And I welcome the freedom and independence of thought that. So, back in the day when I lobbied, you would literally have shootouts in committees. You'd have a 5-4 vote or 5-5 vote. Or eke out, a win.
People would send the majority leader, or you know what I mean? They wouldn't have a vote if they didn't have a quorum. Right. I mean, there were very close votes, even on the floor sometimes too. Under Jack Latvala would frequently, not frequently, but he had a coalition of Democrats that he worked with.
Yeah. It was surprising to me that there were really very few opportunities to actually hash out policy.
Interesting.
That I was like, this is not why this process used to work or should work, frankly. Right. Now, I did actually work with Republicans to amend bills on things that I had developed a sense of expertise among them in the disability space because I've learned it's a 27-year, lived experience at this point. And so, I did work on legislation and along with committee staff, it helped me massage it. And so this year, same thing. I've, amended, and I was asked to prime code the oil spill, the oil drill bill.
Yeah,
That was that Jason asked for. And I have, worked on all of those things. And then a number of people have asked me to be parts of their bills where it comes to disability issues that they're, like Representative Salzman and I worked on a bill last year that passed. So, I do that a lot with my colleagues because, first of all, most good policy isn't Republican or Democratic. Like people with disabilities, that affects every walk of life, every gender, every socioeconomic, everything.
Let's talk about that for a little bit because since I've been reporting, it wasn't called the Agency for Persons with Disabilities. That was a different name. It was probably underneath what used to be HRS, right? Mm-hmm. And then I think it went into Children and Families.
Probably,
I don't remember, but anyway.
Well, HRS became Children and Families, and so that would make sense.
Right. Yeah. So anyway, but it is what it is now. They've had this waiting list forever and ever. We've seen people come up and advocate. And it is, I can tell you, this is nowhere near the same.
No.
Nowhere near the same, my experience, but I fractured my tibia and I was in a wheelchair for 3 months and it was no weight bearing. So it wasn't like I could hobble around. Right. I needed help getting in and out of the shower. I could not get outside the front door without assistance for 3 months. And, I learned very quickly that we are not
doing enough.
We are not a society that makes it easy or even welcoming for people who have physical disabilities.
And it's even worse for those with cognitive and even worse still for those with mental health issues.
So you put all that together and, you've got these people who are waiting for years and years for assistance and they're running a deficit. We keep throwing money. I've set the stage for you. Tell us what's going on with APD and what.
Well, right now, they don't have a secretary right now.
Okay.
So we still don't have a secretary for them. There was not anyone's name that was proffered. There is an acting secretary, Lorena Fulcher, who's a good person. So the way the way this has always worked, we've never funded it appropriately ever since we created it. There was a lawsuit one time that made them fund it, and they caught people up at that one time. It was during Jeb Bush's presidency, if my memory serves me correctly. So, but what's interesting is, and then our son, we didn't put him on the wait list till pretty late because Mom, me, I knew what it was going to take to get him qualified. And I was scared of what his IQ was going to be. I just didn't want to know. And it's very low. Oh. And so I struggled with getting that testing done. And it was just, and then.
I never even thought of that component, facing.
Right. Facing the truth.
Yeah.
Parents are really good at living in denial when it comes to their children. They see the best. They see what there's just a lot. So at any rate, I finally grew up and did it when he was approaching 18 because I was like, holy cow, he's going to be an adult. He's nowhere near ready to be independent and he's this, that, and the other. So I finally put in an application, and it took a long time, but not as long as many, to get off the wait list. So what I learned over time is that the way APD functions is the funder of last resort. So if you're a K-12 child with a disability, the expectation is that they're going to be served through the K-12 system.
Right.
And I did do a lot to get the K-12 system to do what they were supposed to do, which can be up to age 22 because federal law allows for that, right? Okay. So then they say, we don't start until after that. that works great if you do have a K-12 system that is responsive and doing the things that you want it to do. And I really worked hard here in Leon on that and established 2 or 3, 4 programs here to address some of the stuff that I thought needed to be done for our kids. But then the other thing is this. So you have to have funding enough for a couple of things. And I learned a new thing this session, which we'll get into. But so let's say your child there's 7 categories to be on the wait list. So 1, 2, and 3 are crisis kind of levels, like you're a danger to yourself or others. Your parent has died and you're at risk of homelessness, and then a combination of all of those things. And then if levels 4, 5, and 6 you're just kind of creeping up that wait list, right? Because the truth of the matter is, if you don't address these kids in levels 4, 5, 6, they're going to be 1, 2, 3.
1, 2, 3. Right.
And that's the argument I kept making is like, we're waiting for crisis instead of trying to head off the crisis, which I believe in the long run will cost us less money as taxpayers. And so, and I say this because when someone reaches a crisis point, and they are in the deep end, you're talking to go to Tallahassee Developmental Center is $130,000 per person per year. If you're on the way deep end with the behavioral stuff, you're looking at $250 to $360 per person per year. So you put $1 million on the table, that's 3 people.
If you have a leak in the roof,
right,
and you don't fix it,
right, then
you have to fix the whole roof,
right,
or you have to fix the whole house. Right. Yeah.
And so basically you're talking about, so that $1 million for those 3 people never stops, because these people are going to need this year after year after year.
Wow.
So it's very difficult to really look at that. So I worked with APD on let's look at those lower levels and make them as independent as possible, because maybe they won't reach 1, 2, 3, or maybe as they age, and get more, just like the rest of us need more help to functions of daily living, it won't cost as much as $360,000 a year. And so then the average, I think, is if I remember committee hearings lately, it's about 60,000, 56, somewhere in that range. I'll say 50 to 70 for the average person to come off the wait list. And so you could definitely decide, and I think it was going to be like $1.2 billion to cover everybody. So that's set aside that $1.2 billion for a minute. Back at the ranch, we have this stupid business model for waiver support coordinators, because you cannot serve
been hearing
these
a lot
people.
about that. JR and his mother were talking about this during this session, but go ahead. Yeah.
So the waiver support coordinator over here, our law requires them to carry. Now, these are people that work 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. They are literally on call, never ending. So they have to carry 43 cases per waiver support coordinator. That guarantees burnout. That guarantees compassion fatigue. That guarantees that we're going to lose them. So when somebody takes themselves off the table, which happens, there's 43 cases that have to be assigned to somebody else.
Right.
Meanwhile, back at the ranch, a new waiver support coordinator that wants to come online has to intern or be under the mentorship for somebody for 2 years, with a support coordinator for 2 years, during which time that coordinator still has to carry his or her 43 cases, plus mentor this person, plus not get money to help pay for the staffing of this person. They have to figure out how to eat it in their budget to train these people.
Okay.
So then let's say this coordinator graduates from her mentorship or his mentorship, and he or she is ready to put out their shingle or join a group. They got to have 43 cases before they can start.
That's, wow.
It's nonsensical.
Right.
Because I'm looking at how we address that.
How can you change that?
I'm going to file a bill. I'm going to start working on that this summer.
To let them start with however many cases, or
a different model that makes sense, And
but that whole care, what's it called? The care coordinator or the services coordinator. That's been controversial from the get-go, hasn't it?
There's a support coordinator, and they're supposed to, that support coordinator is supposed to be someone who makes referrals for, you need an independent living coach. Here are 4 or 5 in your area that you can select from. You need a personal support person, which comes to your house and maybe is companion care or helps you with functions of daily living. Here's 4 or 5 people here. Oh, you need job training. Here's over here. So they're supposed to be like the center of the spokes of the wheel, where they help you figure out what you need to do. And they're supposed to be like independent, so they're not getting a kickback. They're not self-referring.
They're not supposed to be getting a kickback from if they send them.
And they're also not supposed to say, I can do this for you. And that's the way it's supposed to work. And but then at one point there was like a support, like you could be independent. When Andy Bean was in the Senate, he passed a bill that required them to consolidate. And at what point he wanted...
Andy Gardner?
No, Congressman Bean.
Oh, okay.
Aaron Bean, not
Aaron
Andy.
Bean.
Sorry,
oh,
Aaron,
okay.
yeah.
Yes, Aaron Bean.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, Jumping Bean.
Yeah, loved him. Love him still. So at any rate, he passed a bill that requires them to consolidate. And that, again, that's helpful. But the qualifying organization, like, I think we need to look at how those organizations are structured, as well as this whole mentorship thing. And there's a couple of really good ones in the state, and then the rest of them might need some review.
And then, I didn't mean to interrupt you.
No, go ahead.
I was going to ask, because the last thing that there was a lot of pushback this session was about the managed care model.
The pilot.
Yeah. So is that what? Can you tell us a little bit about that?
I can tell you that they won't. I'm questioning. I'm not questioning. I have a question about those care coordinators, and will they have the expertise for this population? And the reason I say that is that my son's now almost 27, and I've hired people over and over, like whether they were in the school of social work at FSU, college students, like behavioral analysts, all that kind of stuff, to work with them. And if you don't have the skill set, if you don't have the expertise to work with this population, it often doesn't work, as kind-hearted and as loving as they may be, So you've got to, I want to know what their level of training and expertise is. And then they do they first of all do not have the caseload. And I think that's an important thing. They don't have to have 43 people that they're on call for 24 hours a day, 7 days a week.
I didn't know about
that's insane. Because literally, and I think that's an unfair, thing. And they to put anybody who's got to be on call for 43 people.
That's a lot.
It is. So
especially with this population.
Correct, because it's constant, you know. And Jeremy, I'll tell you, he doesn't call his support coordinator, but he calls his independent living coach almost every morning.
Really?
To check in with her and see what she's doing and all that kind of stuff.
Wow.
So, and he'll call at some interesting hours too, because he's called me at some interesting hours. I'm like, why aren't you asleep? So at any rate, so there's a lot in that system that needs to be fixed. And I asked those questions in the healthcare budget committee. Is this algorithm on which you have based the funding model. Mm-hmm. When's the last time you looked at that? So there's language in a bill that was put there based on that question that I worked with the staff on to basically have a study of that algorithm.
Oh, I see. I
asked the question about what is the guiding statute? Say, when's the last time you looked at the definitions in 395? 393, they hadn't. And then they were like, well, we haven't done that in a long time. And then this support coordinator thing, I got to get to that, because it's like a chicken and an egg. You can't add more cases until you got enough of them to add.
It's nonsensical.
We literally have the two largest support coordinator agencies in the state that weren't able to add significant numbers of people off of the wait list because they didn't have, 43, somebody could take on 43 people. And then at the same time, we asked APD in all the hearings, like, do you have an adequate network of support coordinators? Yes, we do. But that's for right now. What about if we gave you I asked this question, if we said to you, you have by a date certain a mandate to take and the funding to take 5,000 people, 50,000 people, or 20,000 people off the wait list, would you be able to do it? No, we don't have enough support coordinators.
Okay.
It was like,
yeah.
Did you hear the last question?
Yeah.
It's very frustrating.
I know. It's been a frustrating for many people for a very long time.
Yeah. So. And I've had colleagues come to me on the floor like, why is it we're only able to take this many people off the wait list with this amount of money? And I'm like, because if you start with the crisis categories first and you fund them, you're talking, those are the most high-end people.
They take up all the money. They suck up all the money.
Right. Mm-hmm.
That's so interesting. Well, good luck with that. We'll follow. We'll have to have you back on to talk about that too, some more. You talked a little bit about Independence Landing. Yeah. Did you want to talk some more about that? Sure. Is it a model?
I think so. Well, so there's several properties. There's 5. We're 6th. So there's 6 entities like this in Florida. Florida's the only state in the nation doing this model of housing, utilizing affordable housing dollars for special populations. Like they have pots of money for housing for foster children. They have pots of money for veterans. And then we had a pot of money. And then they have some for special needs. And then we had a pot of money just for developmentally disabled citizens of Florida to live independently, but they require support system.
Sure.
And it's not a lockdown. It is not a caregiving facility. It is not, that kind of thing.
So is it like an assisted living?
It's not even to that level. It is a really interesting model, and there are people and they have to also have an income eligibility issue. So it's got to be for people who can't or have to meet those income requirements for affordable living access. And then the state requires, or the Florida Housing requires, access to services for people with disabilities. And so there's a service provider who works with individuals on their individual needs.
On site?
Yeah. Well, she works for the individual. So yes, she's got people who are on site for activities that they want to do on site. And then she also helps to mentor them in their apartments or around in the community, all that kind of stuff. And then there's a whole plethora of social and community engagement activities, which she also helps to facilitate. And so this is not a segregated community. We follow fair housing rules, people who live there who do not have disabilities. And everybody who's there is at risk of homelessness because they're going to lose their parent at some point. They're also living below the poverty line. Mm-hmm. And so it's a gift. And we have about 60 people that are living there right now.
Wow, I
and
didn't realize there were that many.
Living their best lives, including my son Jeremy. When I started working on this, I had no idea if he would be able to manage it or not, to tell you the truth. I was hoping, but I didn't know. I mean,
right.
Like I said, parents kind of see their kids in one way, and they're actually not quite as adept in some things as you think. But he lives his best life there. He's constantly on the go, constantly doing stuff. I told this story this week. So when Jeremy loses his internet, the 4-alarm fire goes off in our house. And so he called me one night. And he's at Independence Landing in his apartment. And he's like, I can't my internet. And he's like getting more and more disgruntled as he's talking to me. So I said, Jeremy, Dad and I'm fixing dinner. We'll fix that. Then we got to do this and then we'll be there. And it's an hour, it's 35 minutes drive from our house to his.
Right.
So I said, it's probably going to be an hour to an hour and a half before we can get out there. So but we're coming. So the phone hangs up. It rings again, rings again, rings again. So I'm thinking by the time we get there, so we get out there. So I'm expecting to see him like, stomping around,
Right.
pulling his hair, hollering. And we drive up, and he's got 3 or 4 guys sitting in his apartment. One of them, who's another resident across the way, brings over his hotspot. The other guys were just there to be friendly and supportive of him.
Wow.
There was going to be access to social activities, job skills training, social, engagement, appropriate interactions with friends. But that emotional support system, I didn't see
You didn't
coming.
Expect it.
And I sat in the parking lot and just boo-hooed all the way home when we left.
Yeah.
It was a miracle to see that. And they were all his neighbors, all of them. There was no judgment because it was like, we all got something,
Right,
Mm-hmm.
right. Well, that must be, as a parent, it must make
life-changing.
A huge relief.
It is.
And give you confidence in his future.
Yeah, confidence in his future. And he has gotten much less anxious when unexpected things happen. Like when he misplaces his wallet or his phone or, the internet goes off or whatever. He's much better.
Well, he's not alone in getting anxious over those things.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
Thank you for sharing that with us.
Mm-hmm.
I wanted to talk a little bit. Jefferson County is one of your counties, and they have gone through some stuff in their school system. And you got kind of fired up talking about this not long ago. And I wanted to give you an opportunity to give us a little catch up on, a little history lesson, and also maybe tell us some good things.
Oh, Jefferson Schools is a really interesting story. So, Jefferson has, much like rural North Florida, this is where it all started for our state in North Florida. And so these were really like big communities. Jefferson had a championship football team. The school was located in downtown. So you would see crowds walking to the ball games, and it was just a thriving thing. Well, as people left the community and as things, there were a series of school principals and school superintendents who basically lost control of the school from the financial standpoint. So they did that. And I think it was, I got them back under the locals in 2021. Or 22. And then 5 years before that, they were a charter school. So it would have been preceding that.
They were the first and only, I think, charter school district.
And yes, and this was a charter school district that had to take all comers. It was not a charter school that accepted this person, that person, or the other person. This was one where they had to take all comers.
All children.
Just like a public school.
Right.
So the charter company came in to try to right all wrongs. And about a year into that 5-year contract, they wanted out because it's hard. It's hard. Also, you're talking so when the schools began to fail initially before the charter school came in, the people who could created a private school, Osceola Christian Academy, which is not unlike our Holy Comforter or Maclay here in Tallahassee. Okay.
Right.
And then the others who had the ability to travel, those who maybe worked in Tallahassee, enrolled their children in schools in Tallahassee, leaving behind the poorest of the poor.
That's right.
The neediest of the needy. And truly, when I say left behind. And so many of these children, there were 750 of them. So it's a K-12 that's 750 students, K-12. And so when I got elected in 2020, redistricting was on the horizon in 21, I knew we were in for a redistricting year. Did not know what the maps were going to look like. We passed a redistricting bill in 22, and I landed in Jefferson's district. Jefferson landed in my district along with Madison. So I immediately, before the maps were finished in December of 21, January of 22, my phone started ringing off the hook. And this was, I had no, real information before this at the time, but I was a member of the Public Integrity Committee, and people were saying there's something fishy going on in this school. There's a fight between two consultant groups to try to tell the school district how to improve, even at the same time that the school district was under what is called the Bureau of School Improvement to turn the school around, that is funded by our tax dollars.
That's right.
So there were two consultant groups who were at loggerheads to try to get public dollars, our tax dollars, to tell the school how to improve, one of which had been affiliated with Somerset, the charter folks, the other of which were 2 or 3 insiders at DOE.
Had created their own company.
Correct. And so those two groups were fussing and fighting, and I started getting calls. And so I said, I'm going to call for an investigation. And so I hadn't yet actually filed the paperwork yet, or the letter to ask for it. So I did, and the Tampa Bay Times saw it and wrote an article about it. And I'd also heard and it came to light the first day of the session. And I had a former member who was with Department of Ed at the time come charging up to me and say, "Really, Allison?" And I said, "Really?"
So.
Right. So I said, yes. And I said, I got to tell you, all I see are these two groups fighting over millions of dollars.
Right.
Meanwhile, there are 750 poor, Black, brown, left behind, forgotten children that I haven't heard anybody talk about.
Yeah.
All I've heard about is I want money to tell that school not improve the children's lives, not talk about how we're going to help those families. But, and he says, well, I'm just going to close the school and put them on a bus. And I said, try it, because you have this thing called municipal lines. So that then led to a couple of meetings that got further acrimonious and difficult. And so then, I asked the Auditor General to look to do an investigation, or not the Auditor, the Inspector General, to do an investigation. I finally got a call about it, and it was like, so tell me what you heard.
Well, wait a minute.
And I said, that sounds like water cooler talk to me.
Aren't you the investigating agency? Shouldn't you be
right? And
asking questions?
Right. And so I said, I think you might want to get the parties that were in the room,
right,
who were threatened with their jobs. If they fought this, I said, yeah, there's a log kept of visitors who shows up. And I said, it's not that hard. You could do this. I said, but, why would you engage in water cooler talk and think that's an investigation? That doesn't make sense. And I then wrote an email to that effect because I wanted it on the record. And so it was clear to me that there was nothing that was going to happen at the state level. So, but meanwhile, the school superintendent had hired a really good principal who was, starting to make some real progress, and had brought in, actual certified teachers, and the students were seeing some learning gains and things were looking good. Meanwhile, when they were brought into another member's office, who did represent Jefferson at the time, basically they were threatened with, well, we're going to give you a year to improve your school grade. Now, and meanwhile, back at and you had to improve by 2 grades or we're going to shut you down. So let's review. This was right after COVID.
Oh, that's right. Yeah,
no schools.
All the schools, right,
were exempt. All of them were exempt from doing school grades.
Right.
And so then all of a sudden there was a school grade requirement of this one school, and the improvement had to be 2 letter grades in a year.
Wow.
So it was like basically a gun to their heads, and it was just really unfair, and that meeting did not go well. And so I just kept pushing. I kept talking to people. I kept talking to, had a media availability and just laid it out on the table. And so at any rate, so then I think what happened was those 750 forgotten and undervalued human beings weren't worth fighting over anymore. And they finally said, okay, we're just going to give that back to the schools.
We're done.
Right.
Right.
Plus, there were other fish to fry on the horizons for some of these people that, were much bigger than these 750 children.
Right.
So, and this could have been my mom, right? I told you she grew up in the middle of nowhere. I mean, so that's all I could think about is that this could be, I'm one generation from this. This is like the no joke rule for me. So at any rate, so then, so Jefferson then, the school superintendent did a great job. He got them a C the first year that grades did apply. And then the next year, the school principal that got them to a B, which was unheard of. Amazing, right? Really great move. And then the school superintendent who had hired this principal decided that she didn't want him around anymore because, I guess he became too successful. So there was an election, and he ran for superintendent, and he won.
Yeah.
And so
I think he's a former Tallahassee person.
Yes, he is. And so at any rate, but meanwhile, when the story of Jefferson gets told,
right,
everybody wants to talk about the failure
factory,
right? Which they leave out the fact that this school has come back. Furthermore, one thing I forgot to mention is that while getting the school district back under local control, I also leaned into my previous work with the Children's Home Society as their board chair of getting them to be a community partnership school. And a community partnership school is a model where social services are brought in to help the students with the underlying causes of issues.
I don't think I was even aware of that before.
And so we have a 25-year investment.
Housing insecurity, food insecurity.
Healthcare access. I mean, anything and everything what the family needs. And so I'm actually in the middle of planning a big back-to-school event where I'm bringing in
I know you do these.
Right, resources known to God and man that I can bring in. But meanwhile, the exciting thing about this is that the K-12 school, Jefferson County Public Schools K-12, is the only school district that is a community partnership school in the entire country.
Oh, well, let's do this.
Yeah. So usually it's like one school, like in Tallahassee, Sable Palm Elementary. So it's a K-5. Well, this is K to 12.
Well, that's awesome.
Yeah.
That's great. And you mentioned your back to school drives. I was going to ask you, and I know you've been really generous with your time, but I'll try to wrap up soon. I have a couple more questions I want to ask you. You do, like I said at the top, people are telling me what a great job you're doing in these rural communities, which have very different constituency than Tallahassee, the capital of the third largest state in the country. And I wanted to ask you, Madison County especially, back-to-back hurricanes, the mill shut down. I heard you were there. In fact, I think I spoke to you on the phone as you were there handing out stuff, or I was texting you or whatever. There was like a problem with cell phone service at the time.
Oh, yeah.
But what's going on there, and what have you learned through, and I didn't know that about your kind of rural upbringing, your family, your ancestry, I guess. But tell us a little bit about what's going on in Madison.
Madison is,
I guess it was Taylor County that also.
Yeah, Taylor is not in my district. But there's a lot of people who work or live in Madison and work in Taylor and vice versa.
Right.
So at any rate, so Madison is at this juncture, the fifth poorest county in the state of Florida. And, and the population there is, there's a lot of there's a lot more seniors than there are younger people. They're consolidating.
They're leaving.
Elementary
schools. They're leaving. The kids are leaving.
Well,
They're not.
If you think about this, it's not just at North Florida, but in a lot of places in Florida, the 25-year-old to 45-year-old age cohort is leaving. That's our workforce.
Yes.
It's also our child bearers. So we're losing not just the main earning years for people where they are allowing their money back into their communities, but also the school children who need their schoolhouses for. So Madison has actually shuttered 3 elementary schools in the last year.
Wow.
To a central school that they have. That's both one that's K to 6, and the other one is the rest K to 5, and then
7
6 to 12.
Okay. Yeah.
So
they have an elementary school and then a middle/high school.
So they're down to 2 schools there, like in Leah and Jefferson is down to 1, where we have like 26 elementary schools and 8 middle schools and 5 high schools in Leon. So it's a very different dynamic in those communities, and there's a lot more needs. There's a lot of like really human services needs, and they're not used to understanding what state agencies can do for them, and then the ability to access the services that state agencies can provide. And so I do mobile office hours where usually, like when we're not in session, I call it used to be Monday on the Move, where I would do Tallahassee in the morning,
Monday on the Move,
Jefferson, and then Madison in the afternoon, like throughout the day. I've switched it to Monday in Midtown Tallahassee and Tuesday in town for the other 2 because it was just a long day, and we need more time to be able to resolve the client or I call them constituent cases that come to us. And so I lean in on their issues when somebody asks me, and the North Florida people are pretty resilient. We're not used to knowing that there is a governmental agency that can help them. Like last weekend? I did a resource fair in Madison, and like there's a whole host of transportation issues for elders. And I brought Big Bend Transit was there along with the Senior Area Agency on Aging, and they're like, we can help you to help you stay in your home. We can help you with this, that, and the other. They're like, I had no idea. I mean, and then solving veterans issues on the spot. So doing those kind of things is really important. So I'm doing those quarterly, and my next one will be in August in Jefferson, since I've done 2 in Madison.
A resource.
Yeah. So I'm bringing in, on the back to school, I'm working on getting donations of school supplies from various entities, like backpacks and the stuff that goes in the backpacks, things like that. And then there will also be a way to showcase the things that the school is doing. Like they're going to have all the clubs, like sign up for clubs, sign up for sports, sign up for this. And homeschool students can participate, and that is along with the public school students. And then I'm also going to have a separate room or a separate location for just all that, like health screenings, as well as access to all of these kinds of services that are there for them, because in both counties there's a lot of families that are with the primary caregiver being the grandparent, and so they need a lot of support. With what they're doing. So that's kind of what I'm doing to help.
Thank you for doing that.
Yeah.
You mentioned that you are, you're talking about hooking people up with services, but you've been active in a bunch of different charities. What advice can you give to people? And you're also, like, everybody talks about your ability to raise money. When there was there was talk about you maybe running for Senate, and everybody thinks that would be great. The thought was you would be a great candidate because you're so good at raising, in part because you're so good at raising money. What advice can you give people, not necessarily in the process, but people who want to get involved in charities or, helping others? What advice can you give them on what's the best way to raise funds and how to participate?
Well, first of all, to get involved with any charity, you want to join the board. You want to see if you qualify for a board position, and and then you got to work. It's not like it comes easy. Now, I will say that because of my networks, having been in the lobby field, I knew who was a good potential, not from, I just knew about various entities that were out there that might be interested in supporting, say, Children's Home Society efforts. But mostly it's your network of friends. So if you want to get involved with anything, you have to think about who your network of friends are that you're going to be comfortable going to and saying, hey, we're putting on this event. Would you like to be a sponsor? Not just buy a ticket, but would you be interested in sponsoring the event at a level of this, that, or the other, whatever it is? And so my network, like, again, I didn't ever start out to run, but my network kind of evolved over time just because of the activities that I had involved myself in, whether it was my kids' elementary school, the middle school, whatever it was. And also just, making sure you keep your relationships current. That's harder now for me because I'm like so much of my time isn't my own. So I can't do as much
What's
of that.
a day in the life of Allison Tant like?
It depends on the day, but I will tell you, what is today? Today's Thursday. So Monday, I did office hours at Midtown and then had some meetings in the afternoon. Yesterday, I was over in Madison County meeting with the clerk because we're working on our homework assignment for our property tax. I'm on that select committee. So then also last week, I had meetings with Leon County's people, with Jefferson County's people, and then with Madison. I did all 3 counties last week, meeting with all of their experts, and I learned a lot from them because, this is a lay legislature.
It was really interesting. I listened to the last meeting and the disparities between one county and another. And some of them have the really lowest millage rate and the highest income, and others have the highest millage rate and the lowest
income
and revenue. And I bet you would see quite a disparity.
Huge
Leon County, you have a lot of property that is not on the property tax rolls.
Yeah,
right?
because we have all the state office buildings, of course, the whole Capitol complex.
Right.
Plus, you've got FSU, FAMU, TSC. Then you've got all the public schools, and you've got church land. So all that is off the rolls. Jefferson and Madison have the biggest employers there. Well, Jefferson now has True Leave. That's not... but they probably have some sort of tax exemption somewhere for ag. But I will say that I might be wrong about that, but I got to look at that. But at any rate, the biggest employers...
Jefferson has True Leave. I thought they were in Gadsden.
They probably have some stuff there too, but we have a big... the processing plant wouldn't be, but maybe the grow houses. I have to check that actually. But they are the largest employer over there.
That's interesting.
And then, but Madison, the largest employer is corrections. And so all the corrections land is exempt.
Right.
All of the school lands are exempt. All the church lands are exempt. Ag, there is exemptions for ag properties where there's a homestead on it. So but it's not a whole. I think you have to pay on what you produce. So, so there's so few property owners in both communities that are actually paying those taxes. So,
I think there was one rep said that, and I forget which county it was.
I bet you it was Abbott.
Yes, is it Holmes County?
I don't know that there's not
some county, but he said there were basically 5 or 6 properties that were that had a assessable value of more than $500,000.
Yes, and I asked that question in Madison, and I think they have 8.
Okay.
And then the 500,000. So there's a couple of the proposals are let's do a tax exemption for everybody 500,000 or less. They would have no income.
You're going to have to do there's going to have to be some sort of scale of some sort of qualifier, right? Like on a population under X or
Jefferson's average
density of X.
Something. Yeah. There's going to have to be something for fiscally restrained counties. But Jefferson's average home value is $134,000. Madison's average home value is $209,000. So you talk about
There's probably some outliers that raised.
That's correct. Because the reason it's that is because they got a couple of them that are way high. Here or there. So we actually did this little exercise in Jefferson where it's like, take a dollar bill. So you take that dollar bill and you're still leaving, you're holding sacred the school funding, right? Because school funding,
That's right.
all those voucher schools were standing up, right? So the scholarships have to stay safe. So then you're still going to get taxed for that. So the rest of the money, it's like 50 cents of that dollar is law enforcement.
Right.
38% of that dollar is schools. Then you got 12 cents left. That funds libraries, parks, stormwater, potholes. So what my concern is that people are going to be expecting a big paycheck from a break on their property taxes, and it's not going to be as big as they're thinking, and they're going to be disappointed.
If they want somebody to come when they call 911.
Well, all of us are going to want an ambulance that shows
That's
up.
what I'm saying.
When somebody in your household has a stroke or heart attack,
or you fracture your tibia and you can't
Right,
get up
yeah.
off the floor.
you're still going to want the fire
Yeah.
department to come. You're still going to want, if somebody burgles your home, you're going to
That's
want
right.
law enforcement. So then do we hold that safe, or do we do a special assessment? So get this. In Jefferson, you've got that $220 to $230. That is what you're paying in schools. If you want to have a special assessment just for sheriff, it's $533 a household, a homestead. If you live in the city and have police as well as sheriff, that's another $500. So you're up to $1,230. And then you got this little sliver that's left.
If you do those special assessments, people are going to see that and they're going to get ticked off.
Yeah, there's not an easy answer.
No, there isn't.
So-
I'll be very curious to see what you guys think about that.
So today I'm here, and then this morning I was at a meeting on something related to Independence Landing, a fundraiser they want to do. And so like every day's different. It's kind of what's fun about it too, though. And then I had a dinner last night, and I had meetings all afternoon yesterday. So yeah, just doing the things.
You got a lot of energy. Okay, so I guess we've covered a lot of territory. I want to give you a chance to. I have some fun questions. Let me ask some fun questions. What's something about you that people might not know that you'd be willing to tell us today?
Despite my foul language, I sang in the church choir for years.
I shouldn't have embarrassed. I put her on the defense.
No,
right?
it's true. Listen, it's not a secret.
It's me.
It's not a secret.
They're not saying about you anything that they're not saying about me.
Listen, it's not a secret. Everybody knows.
You sang in the church choir.
Yes, and one of my kids gave me this thing when they were little. It was like, my mother is a saint. I just didn't know saints cussed so much.
Oh, that's adorable.
Yeah.
I love that. Okay, Crocs, yay or nay?
No, flips are better.
Flips. Okay, she's holding her feet up. Favorite place to shop in Tallahassee, or do you shop in Tallahassee?
No, I shop in Tallahassee. Costco. Oh my God, that's my happy place. I love that place.
Oh my gosh, I love that. Your favorite guilty pleasure?
I don't know that it's guilty, but I have an obsession with archaeology and like the find. I mean, isn't that crazy?
Know that. I just went to a talk 2 weeks ago at Goodwood about shipwrecks around Dog Island.
There's so many, and there's
oh my gosh! Next time there's another one, I'll let you know.
It was
fantastic.
Years ago, I called Calvin, and I can't remember his last name. He was the state archaeologist, and I said, "I got to go on a dig.
Yeah.
You got to let me come on a dig." And he goes, "Who is this? This is." I was not elected. I was a nobody. I was a mom, and I'm like, I have this thing. I'm compelled. I think in a former life, and when I was in college, I took a geology 101 class, and I loved it.
Well, I got to tell you, what I learned is these hurricanes that we're having is having a very negative impact on these shipwrecks, either the ones that are under the water or the ones that are, because there's a couple on Dog Island, that I've actually been there. My friend has a house there. And so I had pictures of me and her, we stumbled on this. We didn't even know that it existed. And she was showing, this archaeologist was showing the pictures, and the before Michael, the after Michael. It was really, really cool.
Well, beyond that, guess what? In Jefferson, there's a group called the Osceola Research Institute, and they bring together some of the foremost archaeologists. And this is something I didn't know before.
I need to get on that list.
Oh my God. They do digs all the time, and they actually bring students in from the school. They have a hella good teacher, that Willett Boyer, who's the school district the teacher of the year. And they found Priscilla from Osceola, the mastodon skeleton. Right. It was found right here.
Oh my gosh.
Right here. And there's another one they've just located. And there's a whole bunch of them. Osceola Research Institute. And
I gotta find out about that.
I get so excited about what they do.
I'm psyched about that too. What's your favorite snack in the Capitol? I look at you. I doubt that you snack at all.
I do. But I'm compulsive. I love chocolate. Anything chocolate. Missy will tell you, she used to keep a stash for me in the office when she worked for Lap.
Krispy Kreme or Dunkin' Donuts?
Oh, crispy. Oh my God. I can walk by any other donut but a glazed Krispy Kreme. And then it's like faceplant.
Okay. Audio books or paper books?
Paper.
Okay. Elliptical or treadmill?
Elliptical.
All right. Those are my fun questions. Anything that you want to share with us that we haven't already talked about?
Quite a bit. No.
We did.
Yeah. So thanks for having me on.
It's been a pleasure. Yeah. You're now a diva. And so we got to get you back on here after all this is wrapped up and you can tell us the real story.
Oh, yeah. Well, I have an anxiety point in that my daughter is graduating from college. She's at University of Oregon on the other side of the continental United States.
Right.
June 13th is when we have to go out there for her department graduation on Sunday, and I need a day to decompress from jet lag and be with my bonus son who's out there too. And so I'm like, I have so many projects in the budget I want to see through, and I just don't want to be away while we're working, and I want to.
All right. Well, here's hoping, yes.
Speak it out into the universe.
We'll light a candle. I'll light my Frida Kahlo candle when I get home.
Maybe we can sage the place and get all
the place. All right. Allison Tant, State Representative Allison Tant, District 9. Thank you so much for joining us today.
All right. Thanks for having me.
Thanks for listening to Deeper Dive with Dara, a podcast by the News Service of Florida. Hosted by News Service senior writer Dara Cam and produced by me, Mike Exline. Music for the podcast was recorded by Periodic Labs, LLC.